Hello, my name is Tony. So yeah, Quatermass and the Pit was the third, last and best of Hammer's Quatermass trilogy, and the only one filmed in colour. Some of you might be thinking roundabout now, what's a Quatermass? Professor Bernard Quatermass was the creation of veteran science fiction horror fantasy writer Nigel Kneale. Initially, he developed the character for British TV in 1953. His first outing, the Quatermass experiment, saw him as head of a British space research group that launches a three-man rocket into space. Shit goes wrong when it returns from orbit, and it crash lands near London. The only survivor, Victor Caroon, has been infected by an alien entity and starts to metamorphose into a hideous creature that absorbs other living beings. A trick Russell Brand would master later. Naturally, it must be stopped before it farts up the entire world for shits and giggles. Ends up getting fried in Westminster Abbey, don't we all, metaphorically? Small-scale outfit Hammer Studios bought the rights to make it as a feature film in 1955. It was the first venture of theirs that really set out their stall and put them on the map. Quatermass was played by American actor Brian Donlevy as an American guy and not the British character he was supposed to be. This, I suspect, was to add appeal for stateside audiences, a fixture of British films of the day. Nigel Kneale was not happy with the film version. Eager to repeat their success, Hammer stumped up the cash for the rights to the second TV series, Quatermass 2, making the film version in 1957. Now, Kneale had no control or say over what the BBC did with his scripts or character, a situation he remained somewhat bitter about. Hammer were not his favourite people at the time, and neither were the BBC. Anyway, Donlevy, a chronic alcoholic so howlingly pissed on set he couldn't even read his fucking idiot board, was Quatermass again. Maybe worked cheap for a few cups of rum, and this one was about an alien invasion infiltrating the upper echelons of British government. Now, if that were to happen for real today, either no one would notice, or it might be a big fucking improvement. Wouldn't be any worse either way. Then Hammer really hit the big time when they made The Curse of Frankenstein in 1957, a colourful reimagining of Mary Shelley's novel and the Universal pictures of the 1930s. It had Peter Cushing in it as the Baron and Christopher Lee as the monster. It was an instant box office smash. Suddenly they had a whole new world of gothic horror to explore and exploit. The third BBC series, Quatermass and the Pit, which was broadcast in 1958, therefore took until 1967 to make it to the big screen. This time the screenplay was written by Nigel Kneale himself, who by the end of the 50s had come to the end of his contract and quit working for the BBC, which no doubt pleased him immensely. As a freelancer, he completed the script by 1961, sticking close to the TV original. This one turned out to be way more like it, eventually. I never saw the original TV broadcasts in the 50s, I sort of wasn't alive, but I know people who did, and they enthuse over how groundbreaking they were for the time, and how as youngsters they nearly shit their pants in fear and dread, which you could ill afford to do as pants were rationed in 50s Britain, and many kids only had 2 pairs. Kids in Scotland were okay though, because they had kilts, no underpants, and just shit straight onto the floor. Moving on. Quatermass and the Pit centres around something diabolical going on at Hobbs End tube station in London. A construction team involved in excavation for a line extension unearthed human bones and skulls, and part of a large metallic object buried in the clay. Paleontologist Dr. Roney James Donald and his assistant Barbara Shelley are called in, and they estimate the remains to be over 5 million years old, despite being from a more advanced species than anyone might expect. The metal object is thought to be an unexploded wartime bomb. Reasonable assumption, as they're still being found even today. An army bomb disposal team is called in, with a high-ranking specialist, Colonel Breen, Julian Glover. Breen drags along a disenchanted Professor Bernard Quatermass, Andrew Keir. Quatermass works for the British space programme, which has just come under Breen's military control, and he's not exactly river dancing his ass off with joy over it. However, as more of the object is unearthed, it's found to conform to no known design and is made of an unspecified metal that is impervious to damage. Quatermass is quick to deduce that this ain't no misfiring doodlebug but an alien craft, most likely from Mars, and it got here over 5 million years ago. No one is convinced until weird shit starts happening in the context of the long-standing history of Hobbs End, a region of London with more than its fair share of reported hauntings and other supernatural activity that increased whenever the ground was disturbed. A member of the bomb disposal team apparently witnesses a spectral apparition of an ape-man walk through the wall of the object. Of course, when the craft is opened up and the preserved corpses of several horned insectoid creatures are discovered within, Quatermass seems less of a card-carrying, UFO-spotting loony and more like someone with a bit of a theory going on. Now this is where Neil's script becomes very bold and ambitious in ways that throw up some intriguing possibilities as well as straining the budget of the film. Drill operator Sladen, Duncan Lamont, whilst packing away his equipment alone, becomes overwhelmed by a powerful psychic force. He stumbles away, his mind unleashing a violent telekinetic storm that rumbles people and property. He winds up in a church where Quatermass and Barbara find him. He reveals to them that he was stricken with visions of hordes of insectoid creatures teeming over an alien planet, and he felt like he was one of them, running in fear for his life. As luck would have it, Roney has developed a prototype machine for tapping into the human psyche and displaying whatever it finds as crude video images. Always handy to have something like this lying around. Back at Hobbs End, Roney and Quatermass notice Barbara has fallen under the influence of the alien craft. So they hook her up to the machine and record her thoughts, which seem to depict hordes of Martians engaged in a genocidal purge of mutations in their number. What does this all mean? Well, here comes the bold and ambitious bit. Quatermass theorizes that Mars was a dying planet and the insectoids travelled to Earth where they found it impossible to survive. For some vestiges of their race to be preserved, they used advanced surgical and medical techniques to implant Martian faculties into the psyches of the primitive ape men they encountered on Earth. The ape men evolved into humans with inherited Martian influences buried in their subconscious. Traditionally rendered images of the devil are bastardizations of the horned insectoids. Paranormal activity, ghosts, spirits, apparitions are all psychic manifestations, telekinetic phenomena projected from the human subconscious. Audaciously, it challenges established comprehensions and conceptions of gods, devils, demons, angels, and the supernatural. Or rather, it doesn't really, because it's pure hokum. But it's outrageously clever hokum. They're dealing with dangerous shit, and the dangerous shit becomes disastrous shit when a power cable falls onto the spacecraft, giving it the electrical equivalent of 60 cans of Red Bull and 2 butt cheeks full of super-strength methamphetamine. A massive surge of psychic energy pumps out into London, causing those susceptible to it, some are immune, to go on the sort of riotous rampage only a few tweets of misinformation on social media could cause these days. They attack all those seen as different. This does sound eerily prophetic. As the psychic energy intensifies, wrecking roads and demolishing structures with random ferocity. Colonel Breen is pulled towards the spaceship and dies, like unbelievers do. Got to the party too late there, chum. A massive rippling electrical image of a Martian resembling the devil appears towering over London. Roney has an idea, as someone always does in the next to last moment. Mine usually involves running the fuck away. But Roney remembers how in ancient lore the devil was said to be defeated by iron and water. He reasons that the Martian energy could be earthed and thus dissipated. So he climbs onto a massive building crane and swings it into the spectral image. The crane bursts into flames, he gets killed, but on the bright side, the energy is discharged and the chaos stops, leaving Quatermass and Barbara to stand in silent contemplation in the smouldering rubble of a trashed and ruined London. But at least not one TV set or pair of Reeboks got looted. Ah yes, those were the days. Quatermass and the Pit, along with The Devil Rides Out, ranks as one of Hammer's most literate and daring stabs at legitimising the horror film, elevating it to another level beyond mere garish gothic thrills and max factor cosmetic blood spills. It succeeds by and large despite budgetary restrictions imposing a limit on how convincing it looks and feels and how much authenticity it can achieve. Some of those drawbacks are more difficult to overlook than others. Roy Ward Baker directs with a sure and steady hand and a sharp eye for creepiness. There's a potent early scene where a veteran police officer gives Quatermass and Barbara a guided tour of an abandoned Hobbs End house rumoured to be haunted. The walls are ravaged by claw marks and the pervading atmosphere of doom and dread is almost palpable. It's these small moments that ratchet up the tension and unease, all helped along by fine hyper-saturated cinematography from Hammer stalwart Arthur Grant. Kudos to Hammer for commissioning a score score from British-Australian electronic music pioneer Tristram Carey, who contributes a remarkable sonic enhancement to the action. He fashioned a superb combination of electronic and orchestral cues. The casting is solid, especially the decision to put the robust Andrew Keir into the Quatermass role. My personal favourite performance, and much closer to the character Neil originally envisioned. Barbara Shelley, one of Hammer's most poised and elegant female regulars in the eye candy stakes, is very wisely steered clear of a romantic subplot or simply being just another damsel in distress. She's primarily a colleague, one of the team, and as such adds to rather than distracting from the narrative. Neil's script is economically stripped back from its 6-episode TV origins. It's lean, smart and thought-provoking. He had a knack for filtering superstition, myth and the supernatural through the prisms of science and science fiction. Later in his 1972 cult TV play The Stone Tape, Neil would explain residual hauntings as being accidental recordings looping on electromagnetic media, in this case ancient stones in an old building. He literally foretold of the rise of digital media. His hypothesis has become known in parapsychological circles as the stone tape theory. That's influence, that is, and Neil's skill lay in his ability to craft disturbingly plausible propositions. So you're always thinking, yep, that could very well be. If anything lets it down, it isn't imagination and vision, it's money. Hammer always operated within a miserly budgetary framework, and when it comes to the grand sweep of the narrative, what we get on screen is left wanting. The machine that converts thoughts into visual images gives us a crap combination of bug puppets and live locusts bouncing up and down. The model of the Martian insectoid has all the weight and gravity of a polystyrene cup, and the apocalyptic destruction of London feels cramped and set-bound. Then there's the giant satanic insectoid spectre in the climax that just looks cheap and ropey, a slightly upscale Doctor Who visual effect. If you can get beyond the shortcomings, what you end up with is the best Quatermass movie that delivers the most satisfying experience. Although Neil would resurrect the character for a 4-part ITV serial, Quatermass, in 1979, with John Mills in the title role, it was an incoherent and anachronistic affair with an outdated focus on hippie culture. The scripts, Neil admitted, were written in 1972. He would regain his creative mojo with a wonderfully terrifying TV adaptation of Susan Hill's The Woman in Black in 1989, but Quatermass was done and dusted long before then. A year on from the cinema release of Quatermass and the Pit, pseudo-scientific Swiss charlatan Erich von Däniken would publish his bestseller Chariots of the Gods and give birth to 1 million or so conspiracy theorists who would take to wearing tinfoil underpants because the CIA were probing their balls with alien technology stolen from the pyramids. The big question posed, was God an astronaut? No, he was a used rocket launcher salesman from Gaza. Seems the idea of alien intervention in human development and evolution sort of caught on. It was probably Nigel Neal who got there first in 1958 with Professor Q and his pit, certainly starting something he most likely didn't intend. But what can you do? Thanks most sincerely for your time and attention. Please feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. Until we meet again, give Hobbs End a wide berth on your travels and take good care of yourselves. Farewell, pilgrims.